So, unfortunately, now you missed the entire thing that I just did talking about my guest and his connection to a group that may have been on last week. So, um, maybe we'll get into that later. The joys of live streaming. Anyway, let's check to make sure that we are live. And YouTube just popped up, so I do know that we are live there. So let's put a comment in. So, hey, YouTube. That comment came up. We are live on Facebook. Let me go ahead and mute myself there and put a comment in there. I'm trying to get used to this new keyboard, but I'm not sure. All right, hey Facebook, and let's see, LinkedIn is working as well. All right, and it looks like all of the platforms are live. The comments are coming through. So if you are watching it, which I know some of you are because I can see the counter already, go ahead and tell us you're here in the comments. Let us know that you're here and you're live with us. We got about 2 minutes, even though I started late, so the timer says 3 minutes, but whatever. We run these things a little loose. Anyway. Great guest tonight. We're going to talk about something that we really haven't talked about much on previous live streams or on the podcast or anything like that. We're going to be talking about partner experience tonight. So all of my partners who are in the house, this episode is for you. Both Tony and I have a lot of experience from the provider side of the channel. I've been working on the vendor side of the channel for 10 years now. But I remember being a provider. I'm not that old yet, although some of you will argue that point. But it's a topic that I think we need to talk about because there are some dynamics that have changed in the way vendors are acting in the industry today. And I think a lot of it has to do with some of the power has actually switched to the providers a little bit more, I think, in my opinion. We'll get Tony's opinion on that in a few minutes. But I think there's been a power shift. And so vendors don't hold all the cards. And so there are things that I think a good vendor does today that were not required 5-10 years ago. So promise it's going to be a fun show. If you guys know Tony, you know that this is going to be a fun show. So I don't need to say much more than that. I'm probably, let's see, it's straight up 7 o'clock here according to my clock. So I'm just going to go start the stupid thing. All right, here we are. It's another All Things MSP Live. And of course, I have a wonderful guest tonight. It's going to be an incredible show. It's a tech degenerate that we missed last week. So we have another degenerate on tonight. Now, of course, I am referring to the tech degenerates. If you don't know who they are, we had an entire live stream last Wednesday with a group from the tech degenerates community, and that's what they are. They're a community. They're a great group. The conversations can get kind of distracting, but it's a great group of folks. If you don't know these people, a lot of these people are really influencers in this industry, especially from the MSP side, which is what we don't see a lot. So really check out that show, check out the Tech Degenerates. They really are some of the most helpful people out there from the non-vendor side. And speaking of vendors, we're going to, talk about vendors tonight. And we kind of wrapped this up in kind of the bow of partner experience. And that's what we kind of want to talk about tonight. But before we get into that, I just want to do a couple of little reminders here. If you're not familiar with All Things MSP, we started out as a Facebook group. So it's a Facebook group called All Things MSP. We've got about 4,500 members in the group now. So I'm surprised at how it's grown over the past 4 to 5 years. But really, we are here to be a community around kind of the business operations, the non-technical side of being an MSP. And it's kind of my way to give back and just a way for me to contribute to the community as a whole. Now, we're also on LinkedIn. So if your favorite place is LinkedIn, you can follow us. We have a company page over there under All Things MSP. So you can check that out and kind of follow there if Facebook's not your thing, which I get it, right? If you're watching us on YouTube, or if you'd like to see these on YouTube rather than watching them live, or, you can catch the recordings, find us on YouTube. And while you're at it, go ahead and give us a like, a subscribe, and ring that notification bell to make sure you're notified when we post more of these and schedule them and whatnot. All right, that's enough of me rambling. My guest tonight is no stranger to the channel. He's got a show with Ray Orsini, and I'll have him talk about that more in a minute. He does a lot of work at CompTIA. I don't know how long he's been at CompTIA, like doing stuff forever. But they tend to hold on to the people who contribute most. And I know that Tony has contributed a lot to CompTIA over the years. And you guys know as well that I am, extremely fond of CompTIA, extremely involved. And by the way, once this airs and is published, I will go ahead and put links to the ChannelCon. ChannelCon's coming up in August. If you don't know about it, read up on it, register, go. And speaking of go, Mr. Tony Francisco.
Eric, how are you doing? Thank you so much for having me on the show. This is awesome. Really excited to be here. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It has been a great week. The live stream last week was just phenomenal. I was trying to combine fun and phenomenal at the same time, I think.
I wish I was there. I was so bummed I couldn't attend for a variety of work reasons. And I came back and it was late, and I said, "Did I miss it? Did I miss it?" And people were just logging off. I was like, "Oh." So next time.
We have to finish like by 8:00 because Marvin B starts his live stream at 8. So that's why I'm always considerate, and I always want to make sure I end by 8:00 so that people don't miss Marvin's show.
I just so you know, I think I was texting you. I got off a plane coming from Denver, and it was delayed, and it was a 4-hour flight. And 15 minutes into the flight, I think I sent you the picture. My temporary tooth breaks off in my back, and if you guys have never actually had a molar break off, it's just a temporary that I cracked as a kid. It is an awkward experience. So you're drinking kind of at a weird angle. I smell like row 22. I'm hot off the plane, and I could not be happier to be here. Like I was like, okay, I got to make it. We landed, we're on our way. Let's talk about industry stuff, man. This is not a job for some of us. This is a religion, and it's something we live and breathe for. And your opening, which described about how you're contributing back for the betterment of the community, that's like pure poetry. It's romantic to me. It's just like, oh, thank you, because it helps so many people. It influences and inspires and empowers so many other people outside of just the small group here. This is going to go on for potentially years.
Yeah, and it's these groups that I think, and by the way, we've already got, a few people watching and some people already commenting. In fact, Kelvin, Tony, you probably know Kelvin. I've known him for a while. He's saying that the power hasn't just shifted to individual MSPs, but it's the larger groups, the peer groups, the communities, MSP Geek, MSPs Are Us, Facebook groups, all of the ones that we know about, IT Business Owners Group. There's a bunch of them that are, and he says that the vendors are actually starting to fear these groups a little bit. Um,
Oh,
and there's nothing that strike fear into the hearts of a vendor like the MSP Reddit. Like.
that's the fuel of my nightmares. That is, you are on the precipice at any moment from complete destruction, both from the massive success and acceptance of the community that possibly overwhelms you, your team, and technology, all the way to the other side, which is, yeah, everyone hates you, and
Yeah,
and
yeah,
you're on that precipice at any moment. So you have to do, what's that called? Oh yeah, I don't know, transparent communication. Do
yeah.
what you say what you do. That's why the vendors fear the MSP community, because it was largely unregulated. There are no very specific common bylaws for every single vendor to adhere to in the MSP community. And at this point, the MSP community is now binding together to be very vocal about, and largely agree on a subset of standards as we move forward. What does that engagement protocol look like? And if vendors don't adhere to that, such as transparent communication, I know that sounds awkward to a lot of people, the MSP community gets pissed off. And how dare them do that? Of course, the MSPs that are not adhering to that they're afraid. Of course, they're afraid of that. But isn't it kind of time? I mean, at
Yeah.
the end of the day, I mean, the MSPs coming together and creating what we consider to be the common denominators, the rules of engagement of our industry, the very thing that, I mean, in 2003, and not to bore everyone with this stuff, you've heard it a million times. 2003, I invented multi-tenant hosted exchange. There was no such thing as an MSP. We had VARs. We actually changed the name from the message center back then to VAR Dynamics because there was no such thing as an MSP. There was no cloud used back then. And, creating one of the first ever, hosted services distribution platform with a customer facing interface, the first ever BlackBerry Exchange server. I just dated myself there. We lost like half the audience right there. What's a BlackBerry? Um, is that one with the cord that goes to the wall? No, it's not. It's a little keyboard on it. But I created all this stuff, and so we were the vendor, we were the hosting company itself. Okay, we were the vendor, we were the distributor because we were by definition that distribution layer. We were the MSP because we were managing that end component, adding our own spice to it and flavor to it and support. We were also the customer internally. We understood the end users. So we had all 5 layers because vendors go through distribution to get to the resellers to service their end customers, provide service for the end users. And even getting that out of today's vendors, they don't understand that. The vendors, distribution, that's all there is. Or resellers, MSPs, that's all there is. Hey, there's Eric, what's that called? Oh yeah, the end customer. And it'd be really cool. I know, I'm sorry for shocking you like that on the show. It's supposed to be a kid show, but the end customer would really like if there was documentation for the end customer that's not for the MSP, because then the MSP has to do the heavy lifting, the translation of this is why your customers want this. That's great. Now, how do I rewrite this for my customers? And
Yeah.
anyway, I could go on and on. You and I think we have so much shared background in this. I can't figure out, is this going to be an opinion piece? Is this going to be an education piece? Or is this us just going to be throwing poop and establishing dominance on behalf of the MSP industry? Is it which one?
A little bit of all three is probably the best answer.
Yes.
Because I know, obviously I expressed an opinion at the beginning of the show in regards to how I think there's a power shift. Kelvin, has voiced that as well. And Degley came in just a little bit ago and said, we're stronger together. It's true. And the other thing you talked about was transparency. And I think the transparency piece is what has caused that power shift, because the vendors can no longer get away with telling one partner one thing and another partner something else, because now we all talk. We have these communities. We have Reddit. We have Facebook groups. We have my show. We have your show. There's all of these outlets for this information to get out there now. And speaking of, plug your show for a second. Let people know that you and Ray have a show that you do all the time, and it's great. I love the show.
So what show? I don't know what show. So the MSP Dispatch, it's twice a week, coming on at 10 a.m. every Tuesday and Friday. Um, and it was one of those shows where Ray Orsini said, "Hey, Tony, you know about MSPs?" I said, "Kind of, a little bit, literally since the genesis of no MSP to the
Yeah.
evolution and chronology to where it is today, kind of just a little bit." And he said, "Want to do a podcast?" And I said, "Sure." What's so hard about a podcast? He said, just 20 minutes, 25 minutes max. I said, okay. The first podcast took us, and I'm not joking, about 3.5 hours a piece. I think we just finished show 120, 130, whatever that is. And at the end of the day, it was one of those, sorry, you can hear dogs in the back barking in the background. They're like, "I'll kill you, dog, on a walk that's walking by." Sorry, we did the show and it turned out now we can knock the shows out very quick. There's minimal B-reel, and it has been incredibly valuable to the community. I think there were over 600 MSPs interviewed. What tools do they use to gather news, etc.? And the MSP Dispatch was, I believe, the second most popular tool. And we're so new in the infancy, about a year into it. But at the end of the day, we're just kind of regurgitating, surfacing news that's both immediate, relevant, and we combine that with our opinions based on our experience, which usually, if you watch the show, comes out pretty comical because we talk about my neurotic behavior because all Ray wants to talk about is ransomware, ransomware, ransomware. And you see me twitching. I'm like, I can't deal with any more ransomware. Please, more ransomware. But we talk about practices, best practices, and a lot of focus comes back to exactly what you said, Eric, which is communications, transparency. That seems to be the missing common denominator from almost everything. And when there is transparency in some degree, it doesn't necessarily mean accountability, but it sure is refreshing, and it's respected. So it's a great show, and I love being a part of the show. On the Tech Degenerates, for those of you who don't know, there's a what is it on Signal?
Yep.
And all I know is if I don't look at it, and for a moment it says you have 313,000 unread messages, and I'm going to go through every single one of them, and it's literally every tech degenerate, which are really high caliber people, commenting on, discussing topics,
Yeah.
most of which involve alcohol. So.
Well, we do consume our fair share around here. And so the reason I was laughing was because I thought you were going to stop at 313 and not go to 313,000, which is much more accurate, by the way. Um, I think I was out of it for a week, and there were like, I don't know, 30,000 messages. Actually, 30,000 messages. It's crazy, but it's fun, and the stuff that gets shared on there is important. And I think one of the differences in that community, which I like, is that the MSPs have really, who in a lot of other communities kind of tend to duck to the background, but with the tech degenerates, they are on the front line. They are the front, the face of that
Instantly.
group. Yeah. And the vendors are the ones kind of just, I don't want to say lurking in the shadows, but they're there to help, but they don't pitch anything, right?
There's no pitching. Well,
Right.
there was a couple things in there, but the vendors, frankly, so for all intents and purposes, we're a distribution platform. You know what's really cool for me? I get to actually listen to the engaged MSP saying, "I use this tool now. I really like it. We use that tool a little bit, but it falls short on A, B, and C. We use this tool over here. Oh, we use that tool, but it falls a little short on X, Y, and Z." And you're like, whoa, this is amazing. You're actually getting real time, you're fly on the wall, real time
Yep.
conversations. There's no selling. There's no, well, that's BS. And you're not cutting anyone down. There's no ripping. You're just saying, this is what I use, and here's what I like, here's what I don't like. And it gives you a new palette of colors because and I'll just classify us as a vendor for all intents and purposes. As a vendor, we are stuck with our Crayola pack, our 4 pack,
Hmm.
four crayons. And then the more degenerate messages you read, you're like, I just got a 9 pack as well. And then more people just got a 12 pack. If you read it enough, you're like, I got my 128 pack plus the ultraviolet edition. Like I can see things that I never witnessed before in my life. I never even imagined. And it helps you actually develop not just like the developing what your product or your deliverables are, but it talks about everything from data and security and how to be more cost effective, how to be more continuous on your improvement process that you're trying to do. Are there any strategic um, uh, maybe efforts that you should be making that were completely off the radar before? Do you have to drill down to a strategic consulting that's really purpose built for a particular niche that you never considered before? It's not going to be in the strategy of the overall vendor vision, whatever that may be. Maybe you need a better level, an expert support level, because there's a what's that called? Oh yeah, really smart, initiated people out there that demand some level of quality beyond the over-the-counter stuff that you're currently offering. What are those tailored solutions going to look like? And when I read the script, the 1,400 million messages that go by in an hour, every time I do that, it again gives me a twitch and anxiety of certain things. But at the same time, it's an educational process, and in a very neutral environment, and that's what I like about the group.
Yep.
So right now, you're going to have everybody. The tech degenerate members just went up 1,100. What? What did I just say?
Yeah. The question is, because I'm going to check right now, like, see if anybody's actually,
How was that?
watching.
Actually, let me see. I put a link in there, and then oh, here we go. The first thing after my link I want to point out is Tito's. Did you see the Tito's? Home.
Yep.
It's
Yep.
literally the link, and then from Darren, Tito's. Look at my, and he put it on his doghouse. Oh, that is hilarious. Oh, that is really funny. Okay, that's
Yeah.
hey
Great
Calvin.
stuff, though. Great stuff.
That's good stuff.
So let's talk about partner experience for a second, in terms of what MSPs should be looking to get out of their vendor partners. Um, and funny enough, just as a kind of a sidebar here, CompTIA is actually working on a checklist. We're supposed to have it by ChannelCon, I think.
Nice.
So,
I really hope
uh,
so.
it's going to be interesting, and it's important, and this is we've seen checklists around security, making sure that a vendor partner is secure, which is obviously extremely important. But there are other things that make a good vendor, and that's kind of where I want to take this. Tony, what is some of the things that in your opinion make a vendor a good partner for an MSP?
Oh man, what? That's not a. We don't have enough
I,
time for
okay,
that.
okay. Give me your top three. Give me your top three.
Wow. Okay. Well, we'll start off with the transparent communication. That's a pretty interesting component, but I would address this a little bit differently. I would make this less top 3 data points and position this as top 3 data points in, let's say, top 3 dimensions. So if we're talking about the company as a whole, the company that you're dealing with outside of their offering, their product,
Right.
whatever it may be, the company as a whole. Um, Vision. Where's your vision? I love that you guys are, formulaic in your approach and spreadsheet. And are you making numbers? And congratulations on checking the box. But do you have a vision of how the sum of the individual parts is, or I'm sorry, the sum of the value of your offering is greater than the sum of the parts individually? Because what they're doing is checking the box, and they're not looking at the connective tissue between everything that's binding it all. So what does that vision look like? And is it a coherent, cohesive vision? The second thing in regards to the company as a whole, what is the strategy? And by strategy, I mean the exit strategy, because everyone has in some way, shape, or form an exit strategy of some degree. Is the exit strategy going to be channel until we get acquired? And does the acquiring company, what are the dependencies? Does the acquiring company have a channel strategy? Do they care? Do they even know what the channel is? And if that's the case, does everything dissolve when the acquiring company takes over? So what is that exit strategy and the strategy as a whole? But that's fitting very nicely with the vision. Okay. And finally, the transparent communication. The transparent communication is very much in line with the vision, the strategy, and the ability to communicate it. And I live and breathe by this. If you can't explain it, you don't understand it. Live and breathe by that. Now, once you understand it, once you understand the mechanics of X, once you understand the anatomy of X, you can control it. You can manipulate it because you know where you can be effective and efficient. And frankly, what's just a waste of your resources? So, in the event of, let's say, a disagreement, a debate, whatever you want to call it, if you sincerely, authentically try to understand everything and learn, say nothing, just listen and learn. One of two things is going to happen. You are A, going to be educated, and that is fascinating, or B, the holes in their strategy are going to become very apparent and you've done nothing. And now it becomes less of a monologue, more of a dialogue. And that's a great, in my opinion, it doesn't just promote communication, it mandates thoughtful, rational thinking. And so again, if you can't explain it, you don't understand it. But once you understand something, you can control it or manipulate it. So I feel like the transparent communication forces them to understand exactly what's going on. And in order to understand it, it better be aligned with your vision and the overarching strategy. So that's what I would consider to be the top layer. That's at a company level. Now, when you're jumping into the product, and by product I mean service, the product has to, in some way, shape, or form, adhere to that nicely. So, what is that product vision? And is the vision going to be, from a technical level, addressing security, or is it just addressing and delivering X and generating revenue? So, we can kind of plug in this. I'm kind of plugging in security into that vision portion of it. Do you have an architecture, because that's part of the vision, in my opinion, an architecture that doesn't just bolt on security, but actually includes subsets of an architecture of core components that are based on and built on a secure environment? Is it a micro service architecture across the board with hyper queuing mechanisms? Better be. Because if it's not, well, good luck if you get what's that called? Successful. If you get successful, and then everything starts collapsing because you actually have high volume of transactions. So is that architecture, which is very much in line with that vision, is that architecture there? Is the crew, the personnel that's working on that architecture, are they? How do I say this? Are they in line with the company? There's a persona, okay? There's a corporate culture, and they want to call it corporate culture. But you have development teams, and then you have support teams, and you have sales teams, okay? Sales and development cannot be more polar. You're going from, it's like going from accountant to the Wolf of Wall Street. They're kind of both accountants. No, they're not. They're both in finance. They're not. They're totally different. So is that development team going to fit inside that culture? Because that will fit very nicely into, frankly, the execution of the architecture, and more importantly, that final part, which falls under the communication. Are they malleable to, hey, this needs to change? And if they can't change it, well, maybe they don't see the vision. And if the vision isn't in line with the strategy of, hey, being maneuver or malleable to the needs of the community, then clearly any communications that come in they're indifferent to, which largely depends on the culture of the company. Anyway, I could sit there and talk on and on about this.
Yeah,
I feel like
no,
I'm boring the audience, but does that make sense? Is this resonating with you?
no, it makes sense. And I think from a vision standpoint, they have to be listening to the community in order to know what the vision should be. They need to know where the industry is going, because another side effect of things kind of switching to, the power shift to the MSPs is that the vendors don't get to dictate how the industry moves anymore. And so if they're not listening to their MSP partners, to the rest of the industry, they're going to not get that vision correct. If they're still trying to come up with what the vision should be rather than finding out what the vision should be, I think there's a huge miss there. And that is where it starts cascading down, because if you don't have vision right, you can't get strategy right. And if you don't have, all those things, you're just not going to have the right culture. And it's all of those things that you just talked about are absolutely true.
Listen, I would love, love, love to take credit for all that and say that I'm smart. I'm literally just saying the things we all understand. Everyone's like, yeah, I'm just clearing out the white noise and let's compress it. You got 60, 120 seconds, Tony. Go, go, go. So yeah, we're filtering out that white noise and saying the one thing that we see every single day. The problem is there's some people that are so new into it that they're frustrated with the minutia, and when they start backing out, they start seeing, big picture, big components of it that equal those things listed.
There was another thing that you kind of mentioned a little bit in there, and that is, what's been going on with mergers and acquisitions and private equity. We have all seen some of the devastating effects on a vendor, either through acquisition, being acquired, being, bought by private equity, whatever it is. There are some interesting cases. Personally, I was there when SolarWinds bought Logic Now, and we tried to combine it with Enable, which I think was not. I don't think any of them go smoothly, and that was certainly not the case with that one. It wasn't terrible, I can tell you from the inside. It might have felt that way from the outside a little bit, and it took them a while. But I don't know. From what I've seen lately, that's an example where now they've split off from SolarWinds again. They actually seem to have gotten quite a bit better in all of those realms, because I'm still in a lot of those groups, and I don't see nearly the complaints that I used to have to deal with when I was there. So, I think that things are changing for the better, but there have been a lot of disturbances in the force, so to speak, when when these mergers and acquisitions happen.
Yeah, I think that's very much in line with people struggling to identify what that vision is, and people really struggling to explain what do they do. And if you're trying to explain what you do, but after the merger and acquisition, you don't really know what you're supposed to say, then you definitely do not know what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
And if you don't know what you're supposed to be doing, I'm just going to throw this one out there. I may be very wrong. You're probably not going to do it very well. I'm just throwing that one out there. I could be massively flawed in that logic, but at the end of the day, it goes back into what I say. If you can't explain it, you don't understand it. And when you truly, truly look at the entire picture, everybody is going through these mergers and acquisitions. If you really back up and we just kind of separate the wheat from the chaff and say, okay, this is the big groups, you're going to find a majority of these cases coming down to this. A lot of the people are spending more time trying to keep their job and not doing their job. Okay. That is such a flawed and toxic theme that I think we see what bubbles up after that, and it's almost predictable. Now there are some cases where that's not, that's not the end result. But if we're trying to manage expectations, we can say, okay, explain this back to me, finance guys. explain this back to me from the finance side. Okay, hold on just a moment. You're not the end all answer. Technical team, how is this all going to fit together? Oh, it won't fit together. Hey, back to you, finance guys. I understand that this is going to look like a lot of money, but if it doesn't fit together, just throwing this one out there, let's think of another direction, another model. That doesn't happen. That doesn't happen. And you have, like I said, a very toxic. When I hear M&A, that's like verbal Ebola in a lot of cases. I go, oh, you know, and so I try to manage expectations accordingly by asking people to explain it, and it is fascinating what you see from that simple theme.
Yeah.
I don't know. We could talk about that all night long.
Well,
Yeah.
and it that actually brings up a good question that I haven't looked into, and I just haven't heard anything about. Maybe you have. Is are mergers and acquisitions on the MSP side having the same disruptive force? Because I suspect that culture problems are going to be culture problems. They're going to exist in both places. Granted, larger organizations is probably harder to solve culture problems. But with smaller organizations, you lose one or two key players, and it could be a huge disruption as well. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that. I'd certainly be interested to know if any of the MSPs in the audience or who are watching this at a later date have comments on that, because it would be interesting to see how that figures in.
We could peel that back a little bit, and I would argue that losing one or two players in a small company has a devastating effect. I would also suggest that having one or two individuals without the vision, without the passion that are at a top level of a large organization has devastating effect. Now, one takes a little bit longer to really come to fruition, and typically in a large organization, you're backed by millions, tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of revenue and kinetic energy that really, really dilutes the impact of that one person's poor performance. However, if we're talking about vision, if we're talking about the explanation of the vision, if we're talking about the execution of the vision and the plan associated with the timeline, and clear communication with accountability if not met, I have this rule: two people in an elevator, one person farts, we all know who did it, right? And when you keep it really, really simple, I love that my stuff makes you laugh because you're like, that is really funny. It's borderline inappropriate, but it's so
Oh no,
true.
there's been much more inappropriate things said on this show, so you're good. You're good.
Oh, okay, good. Well, then you just expanded the parameters of what I'm allowed to do. What did Tim say in there? He said, building a
Building
company
company
culture.
culture needs to flow across all business units, so there isn't a single point of failure.
Tim, you're just being rational now. Come on, stop being so controversial. Uh, like I said, the reality is that there are so many people that have a vision, but the vision is so hyper siloed, it is not cohesive with anything else that's involved. And the problem is that vision that's so hyper siloed is focused on making money. So everybody listens to that. But when it really comes down to it, it doesn't equate too much. And there's
Yeah.
so many, even the multi-billion-dollar companies, right now the MSPs listening, they're like, oh, that company starts with this letter. We all know, okay, they're checking the box. It's not cohesive. So as much as I would love to say that, I had a really well crafted response to this that was very specific, I don't want to make anyone mad. I think we all understand the problem. I think we all understand who's farting in the elevator. And at the end of the day, there has to be leadership changes at the big companies to people that really have vision, that are easy to work with. There has to be what I consider to be at the smaller companies, a vision. There's three types of employees, three types of workers. You have someone who makes the widget, someone who sells the widget, and someone who supports the widget. Now you can have multiple people in each of these, but for the small organizations out there, if you make the widget, if you're the programmer, if you're the designer, or whatever, you're really, really crappy at selling it. And you are. Okay. Find someone to sell it, make purpose built. These are machines, monsters, let them go sell, 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 and maybe have some minor communication or influence over the making of, because what you do resonates and vice versa. But then you got to figure out who's supporting the widget, and is your support team expert level support? What do your customer facing contracts look like? Your partner facing contracts? How do you take credit cards? Do you have a good ticketing system? Do you take phone calls after hours? All of those things are part of supporting your company. And a lot of those are bolt on stuff at the end. You need somebody that just lives and breathes that as their religion, just like you need someone whose religion is to go out and sell whatever you are making or someone is being made. So I think in the larger companies, they break that up nicely, but you may fall diluted on the vision. In the smaller companies, they tend to take on too much load. You need to find the right people. Take the load off you, focus on what you do, and you have to have what's that called? Oh, trust. You have to have trust that there's going to be somebody that actually does their job, but make sure they're accountable so they keep things moving and faster.
And Craig is chiming in with time for EOS. And if anybody's here who doesn't know what EOS is, it's the entrepreneurial operating system. Easy enough for me to say, right? And there are different flavors of it, right? There's a book called Pinnacle that's very similar, but it's about processes. And if you're an entrepreneur, just putting MSP aside for a minute, if you're an entrepreneur and haven't done a little research into EOS and haven't read the books, highly suggest it.
That's a game changer. That's what I consider to be not just the framework, because framework is incredibly important, but it is the actual execution of each of these individual steps. And if you lack that and you're struggling on how to do things, it's probably because you really can't explain what you do and how you do it, which means your ability to control it or manipulate it or be effective at it is probably going to be a little bit less present than you would like. And
Yep.
the EOS is a great framework for a large majority of companies starting out to get things moving. And then you have to evolve it from there. But that all comes in 50 different flavors as well.
Yeah, but it gives you a starting place. It
Oh,
gives
yeah.
you a process and a framework to start working in that isn't an MBA, right? You don't need an MBA to understand it. It makes sense. They put it in simple terms like rocks, it just works. And
Eric,
so
you're making it sound like anybody could go start and run a company. It's magic. It takes a lot of power to do that. Don't tell anyone there's actually tools out there to help them become more effective. Why would you do that?
Tony, you and I both know it's not magic, it's hard work.
It's
It is.
large volumes of caffeine. All
Well,
the caffeine.
so Craig says, shh.
Yeah, exactly. We have to say the
Yeah,
CEO.
and Tim did put up that it was Traction is the name of the book by Gino
Nice.
Wickman. Actually, my copy is right here.
That was beautiful. I like that. He's like,
I mean, what can I say? I mean, it's that, and I'm also reading another good book. I'm only partway through it, but it's this is my every morning study book for right now. It's Business Made Simple by Donald Miller. Got a lot of good stuff in this book too.
nice.
So, a couple of recommendations there for you.
What else do you want to talk about? We could literally talk all night about, hey, let's do this, and what about this? But I don't want to take up everyone's time.
We could, but as I
I-
told you, when we were, pre-show, I do these on Wednesday nights because usually my wife is not home. If you are a longtime watcher of this show, you know that already. And so that is not the case tonight. So it is not going to hurt my feelings if, we start to wrap this up at some point.
Keep going. Let's talk. What are we talking about? Are we talking about load balance architecture, geospecific load balancing? Are we talking about microsegmentation? Like, are we
No,
talking
we're
about
not talking
just
about any
moral
of those
flexibility? Moral flexibility of vendors? Are we talking about? Talk to me. What do you
So
want to talk about?
there's an interesting component that I think kind of explains, and you can give me your thoughts on this, but this is my opinion. When, you know, a lot of the vendors in this space started as MSPs. You know,
Yes.
they were MSPs. They wrote their own solution. Other people said, "Hey, that's great. Can I buy it?" And so we have a culture in this industry, I think, that uh, is really kind of homegrown. And what's happened is as the industry has evolved and these companies have gotten larger and finance people have started to get involved. And I know some finance people, they're lovely people. But I've also seen a lot of companies get derailed
Hmm.
because investors came in, they had to start generating X numbers to get to a certain point, to get a certain valuation, to all of these certain things. And, on one hand, I appreciate the fact that Enable is doing that and my stock is going up. But I think it's a component of what has affected the vendor side of this industry because you started with companies that really understood MSP mentality, but then as they grew and evolved, they became more distant from that because they were run by people who had to do other things besides just develop cool technology to solve a problem.
There's so many things, so many things. In this particular situation, this context of this particular topic, I would suggest that the law of entropy is seems to apply here because natural order will occur unless checked regularly, and the MSP community needs to be fed, needs to be watered, and it needs to be done often. And it's at you mentioned it yourself. It's a homegrown. It is such a just quickly evolving subset of an industry that before was the VAR industry with the VAR. CDW is considered a VAR.
Mm-hmm.
Really? A CDW VAR? I mean, that's a one heck of a VAR. And then the question is, what value are they putting on? And everyone's trying to stack on their own value add, which then makes, by definition, every MSP a VAR. And by definition, Best Buy is a VAR because they add their own warranty stuff on there in some capacity. So the terms have changed and they've evolved very quickly. You went from VAR to MSP to TSP, the technology service provider, where everybody is now selling the same thing, and they're realizing that now they're just looking for a faster, a more frictionless way for procurement, management, and payment for the services they're offering, and they can stack on their own amazing sweet sauce in there. But like I said, entropy is seems to apply in this particular case because unless it's really, really, really checked regularly, natural disorder will occur, which kind of goes into the process that you were that the MSP community originated by, which was how was your product created? Like what actually made your offering? Was it because you created anxiety and then you created a solution for it? And that has everything to do with marketing. And we know that we see that it's going to trigger right now. The moment people hear that, they're going to go, oh yeah, we did that. We did that once. And then you turn that into hyper segmentation of the MSPs. We're going to add an S onto it and call it MSSP. Well, technically, shouldn't you all be doing security in some capacity? No, but we're super security. Now we're super security provider. So we're an MSSSSSSP. We're the and okay, at the end of the day, you have a specialty and and that's the way it should be. It's just like when you go to a store, you're going to go to Target for one thing, and you're going to go to your local Kroger, or, HPB, whatever it is, to find your other thing. But you're not going to go to this store for something that is probably half the price or 20% less at Target. I get yelled at for this stuff like all the time. But what I think is important for us to understand is that as the hyper segmentation occurs, the very base of our industry is now being pushed up because there's new layers. It's kind of like the opposite of your skin, the epidermis, and everything starts to evolve. It's the opposite, and everyone is getting pushed up. Somewhere at the top of the pyramid is going to be a very large general MSP, but at the bottom of the pyramid, there's going to be so many different subcategories of that, and they're going to be really good at what they do. But it's really up to the customers that they're addressing to fit into that. Now, I feel like vendors, they hear that, but they don't really cater to the audience that they're trying to serve. They're not creating an architecture, an open architecture or environment to address the lowest common denominators, and then hyper evolved, purpose built services that range everything from the very product that they offer to the marketing communication, to the billing options, to the support options, to even the general education of the MSP reseller audience of what they're doing. They're just trying to say a one size fits all. And I don't have the answer. I wish I did, but I feel like I can explain what I'm observing and what we've all been observing in some degree. But what are
Yeah.
your thoughts on that, Eric?
No, I agree. That segmentation is definitely taking place. One of the things that I'm seeing kind of specific to that is people who have been MSPs for a number of years are starting to pull back and actually consider going back into more of a consulting role. So they're not providing the actual IT services. They're handing that off to an internal IT department that they are still managing, but they're doing it as a consultant and not providing the tools. It's it's very interesting because that's where I used to be. That's where I
Yeah,
started, right? It's just
it
coming
just
back
looped
full
around.
circle. But it's different because the industry is bigger and you do have these large MSPs. And one thing that I see in vendors is that you have large MSPs that operate as large businesses. You have a good swath in the middle that is kind of the Wild West. And then you have a lot of small MSPs. And there's nothing, like you have the MSP that you want. I am a firm believer in that. The problem is vendors struggle to serve those three. And it's a problem. Now, sometimes, like I think for one, Pax 8, SureWeb, people like those solve part of that problem, right? By being able to sell to those smaller MSPs the way the smaller MSPs want to buy. And I think it's great.
Yeah.
But sometimes vendors they don't get that. But there's that dynamic of one size does not fit all, and vendors struggle to meet the needs of those. I'm going to call them three different, sections of the pyramid, but really it's a spectrum.
Absolutely. You mentioned, and I don't like talking company names just because, there's going to be people out there that they love Microsoft and other people, I hate Microsoft. Hey, listen, first off, everyone hates Microsoft in some degree, shape, or form. But go Windows,
Especially this week.
Yeah. Oh, especially, I like the highlights, especially. But we have an ambient hatred of all vendors in some capacity. Right. I think that's an appropriate term. But when we're talking about distribution, so Cloud Plus My Organization is, or by definition, a distribution platform. We never intended on being a distributor. Distributor, by definition, holds the vendor relationships. I don't want the vendor relationships. I just want to do the cool platform stuff. And we got some really cool stuff that's announcing, like I mentioned earlier in the call, later this year. Really, really excited about some stuff coming down the pipe. But the good news is I'm kind of in this neutral environment where I work with multiple distributors. I work with multiple vendors. And I feel like you hit it right on the head, where we talked about, you mentioned SureWeb, Pax 8, there's the TD Synex, there's we can go through all the list of the distribution. And then don't forget, distributors on the IT side are here and we're present. But on the telco side, we're talking about the Teleris, the Intelisys, and a variety, Avance. Those are very present as well. Those are distributors. Um, I feel like everybody that has a favorite is just picking the cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry bin. And they're doing exactly what you said, which was they're not really addressing the audience as a whole. Like, for example, and I say like, hey, do you have a customer facing interface? Oh, we don't ever allow our customers to have the customer interface. Yeah, that's later in the game. But guess what? In the beginning, you have an 18% of, and this is just general MSPs, factual statistical information that's important. 18% of your customers are on the onboarding or offboarding portion of their life. And it's typically 6% on the offboarding and the other 12% is the onboarding. And that's just the way it works. So if you're saying, hey, listen, that customer interface for somebody that's leaving, no, don't only do it. Here, we're going to give you yourcustomerdomain.com, and then you have control of everything from the distribution, the stuff that we normally do for you. So now we, the MSP, get to hold that revenue stream and give the perception that they're in control until they want to leave. They just get an invoice from us. And maybe there's a change of management over time, and maybe we get back into the goods, into good relationship with that customer. It happens to all MSPs. Don't say that won't happen. It happens to all MSPs. Yep. Now let's look at the other side. 12% of your customers coming on board. Hey, listen, Eric, I love you as an MSP, but I'm not going to give you complete control. And you say, hey, Tony, it's totally cool. Here's a customer interface. You have complete visibility into everything. We can do it together. But if you need me, I'm right here, and I have complete visibility in everything. I am here to help you at any point in time until the point where I say, hey, Eric, I'm done with this shit. Can you just take it over? You went from a barely managed to a fully managed transition right there because of that customer-facing interface. And the value of that is completely evident when I say that to MSPs. But remember, it started off with, oh, I would never give my customer customer interface. Well, now hold on, let me think of it. So the point is, do you have, as a distributor, a customer-facing interface? Can they self-provision, self-administrate, both onboarding and or offboarding? Do you have the ability to have a different price for a different service for a different customer and change on the fly? Do you have an auto expiration of that price so you can run promotions literally and everything? Can you add your own components in there, such as, you know what, I want to on Wednesdays we're going to do managed car washes. That's my new MSP, managed car wash service. Does your platform allow that? Is it a single place for the procurement of the management of and the payment of the hosted services? And can you get products in there? So everything I just said as just normal and ambient computing, distribution, IT, as that sounds, that's a very rare find. And by rare, I mean, I don't know anyone who does that. So I think the industry is going to evolve to do everything I just said, and that is going to be table stakes, because everything I said is literally just the procurement, management, and payment process. I'm not even talking about the products that are in there and then the services that are stacked on top by the very MSPs that we're talking to right now. That's when things start getting really fun, because then we start getting into all these weird subcultures and specialties. Anyway, something we could talk about all day and night.
Well, it's interesting because we actually had Rick Beckers on a month or so ago, and he was talking about a very similar type of interface for MSPs to be able to provide to their customers to do exactly that. Meanwhile, we've actually had some really good comments come in that I want to touch on for just a second. Tim, it says, but vendors have an ideal customer profile that may not fit all of MSP personas. That's absolutely correct, Tim. That's exactly what we were talking about. And then this is one that I think we could probably talk about for a minute or two. Just a minute or two, because we have a hard stop at 8 o'clock because, by the way, tonight is Marvin B's. So if you know Uncle Marv's podcast, it is Marvin B's 500th podcast, and he does his live stream on Wednesday nights at 8 o'clock. So I encourage everybody, after we're done here, go over there, join the party. But anyway, so Henry says, our industry is plagued by bad definitions at every level. Absolutely true. And on all sides of the channel. Take pen test and the wide array of marketing BS out there. We need a better common language for it all. And this just goes for MSP.
Boom. Thank you, Henry.
Yeah. I mean, we talked about VARs. You know, the definition of VAR has the same problem. So
No,
yeah,
no, Henry, like that is one of like when we talk about pen testing. I love that. I mean, pen test. What does that mean?
yeah. What
I
does it
mean,
mean?
are you talking about internal, external? Are we talking about stress testing environments? Because I mean, I can. Are we talking about code level? There's so many things that we could talk about that, but I don't think that's where the subcultures have evolved quickly enough for that particular term. But yet, you've got the over-the-counter MSPs. Oh, we do pen testing, and then you got the really hardcore MSP over there. Yeah, we do pen test. You can't call that pen testing, you know. And then guess what that does? It confuses the customer. It causes confusion in the industry, and then somebody adds an S to their MSP, and now we got MSSPs. And that is how the MSSP was born. Everyone, right there, you heard it live here.
Yeah. We're so eventually, are we going to have an MSSSP?
It's gonna happen. It's gonna be a super security.
I don't know
Yes.
because four S's like on your boarding pass, that's the worst. Have you ever had the four S's on your boarding pass?
No,
You do not want it.
what is that? I don't even know what that is.
So I don't know what it stands for, but it is like super secret superior screening or something because boy do you get screened.
They get the glove. You get the glove tests, and they say
Almost.
Eric, and you're like, well, again, I just got off a flight. I literally got off the flight. That's probably a good roundabout. I got off the flight from Denver, came running in here, booted up my PC, jumped straight on this, and Eric, I could not be happier to make this show. And I thank you so much. I know we're kind of running on time, but I can't thank you enough. This has been a true privilege and a pleasure to be on the show with you. And this is the type of stuff that I would literally talk about all day and night. This is what I live and breathe. And we scratched the surface. We didn't even talk about
Right.
what I think I listed like probably 5 or 6 things, and we just like talked about 2 barely. Oh man.
Next time we need to actually prep so that we, have done some research, before we do
Oh,
something
now,
like this.
now you're just being rational again.
I know I'm
So-
being rational, and this is, But anyway, and Degley, thank you very much. He says another great conversation, Eric and Tony. Thank you. I think this is probably something that we need to come back to in another 6 months, see where things stand. So Tony, if you're open to it,
I'm in.
I'll reach out, and we'll go from there. So Tony, you hang out in the green room for just a second while I wrap things up.
We'll do-
All right, everybody. Thanks again for joining us. I think this show brought a perspective that we haven't had before. And I think it's a very important one. I think that there are a lot of changes that are going on, especially between partners and vendors, that are really important to pay attention to. And as an MSP, I think it's important for you to know what kind of partner your vendors are so that you have the proper expectations when working with them. Because when everybody sets expectations properly, everything works a lot smoother. It's like when you have a good managed services agreement with your customer. You know how that works. Okay, that's it. That's enough for me. I will talk to you guys later. Have a great evening. I'll see you on the next one.